All right, so are you ready for another deep dive? Buckle up, because this time we're going to take you deep into the revenge, and wow, what a screenplay.
Yeah, it's a wild ride from start to finish.
It really is. I mean, this 2007 screenplay drops us right into the action with an ex-Marine named Declan who's got PTSD and finds himself in a conspiracy that makes his past look, well, pretty tame.
And on top of all the action, there's some serious stuff in there too. We're talking like moral dilemmas and the cost of war and even the idea of redemption.
It's all in there. Speaking of starting the bang, the screenplay throws us right into the middle of things. We find Declan.
Yeah, blindfolded and knocked out in the back of a van,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Then he wakes up and it's pure chaos. There's a fiery crash, a shootout, and suddenly he realizes someone's trying to kidnap him.
It grabs you right from the start. You're immediately wondering what this guy did to end up in this mess.
Right. Like, what kind of past would make someone to target like this? That's what hooked me.
Yeah, and the writer's really clever about it. They don't give you all the answers up front. You have to put the pieces together yourself through these little flashbacks and the way other characters react to Declan. It keeps you on the edge of your seat the whole time.
Totally. It's like a puzzle you're trying to solve.
Exactly. And speaking of puzzles, let's talk about Declan's past. We get these glimpses into his life before all this, like the birth of his daughter, Angie, back in 2001.
Yeah, those moments really stand out. It's like a huge contrast to all the darkness in his life now. Do you think the writer was trying to, make us sympathize with Declan early on? Especially considering what we find out about him later.
Oh, definitely. It's crucial to see that he's not just some hardened soldier. He's got a heart. He's capable of love and connection. I mean, you see that with his daughter.
Right. So then there's this mysterious kidnapping attempt. And then, boom, the FBI shows up.
But then it turns out they weren't even after Declan.
Yeah, they were after someone else entirely. So the question is, who was really after Declan and why?
Well, that's where Angar comes in. And let me tell you, his story is just as intense as Declan's. He's the one behind the kidnapping, but he wasn't always this vengeful figure.
Right. The screenplay shows us he was just a regular family man living in Kandahar, Afghanistan.
Yeah, trying to live a normal life. Until 2004, that's when everything changes. His whole family, except for him, is killed in a bombing.
And this is where things get really interesting.
Because it wasn't just any bombing, it was a U.S. drone strike. And guess who was operating that drone?
Declan, talk about a twist. Suddenly, his PTSD and all that guilt he's carrying, it takes on a whole new meaning.
Yeah, it's not just the trauma of war anymore. He's directly responsible for the very tragedy that's driving Angar to seek revenge.
It's like they're both trapped in this vicious cycle of violence and pain.
Exactly. But here's what I find really intriguing. Angar's plan goes way beyond just getting back at Declan. I mean, he's playing the FBI like chess pieces.
He's using them. So do you think he's after something bigger than just personal revenge?
It makes you wonder, right? Like, is this just about vengeance, or is there something more going on? Maybe something political.
Maybe he wants to expose the whole system that led to his family's death. It's hard to say for sure. And just when you think you're starting to understand what's going on, bam, two new characters show up.
Mr. X and Miss Y. Talk about mysterious.
They appear out of nowhere with all this advanced tech and a bunch of bodyguards.
They're definitely not messing around. They forced Declan to build this, like, super drone that can hack into U.S. military systems.
Oh, yeah. That's some serious stuff.
Yeah.
And Declan starts to get suspicious of them. He's not sure what their real plan is.
Uh-oh. That's never a good sign.
It's not.
Oh.
And to make things even more complicated, we find out Angar's done something else. He's kidnapped Declan's daughter, Angie.
Oh, no. That's plain dirty.
It is. Angar is using her as leverage to make sure Declan cooperates. It's one crazy twist after another in the screenplay. Talk about a tough spot, right? Declan's basically stuck between a rock and a hard place.
Yeah.
He's got Mr. X and Miss Y pushing him to, maybe betray his country.
Yeah, and then on top of that, his own daughter's life is on the line.
It's a seriously messed up situation.
Yeah.
Did you think the screenplay, did a good job showing how hard this was on Declan? Did it feel real to you?
It was definitely intense, yeah. They really show how much this is weighing on him. He's not some action hero who can just shrug it off, you know? He's a dad who's terrified for his kid.
And plus, he's already dealing with all the guilt from his past, and now he's got to make a choice that could have, huge consequences.
Right. And don't forget about the PTSD. That adds a whole other level to everything.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's not just there for drama. Those flashbacks and nightmares, they show how trauma can mess with your head, especially when you're under pressure.
It's like his past is always there, haunting him.
Exactly. And it makes you wonder, Can he even think straight with all that going on?
Good point. It's not like he's in a normal state of mind.
Okay, so while Declan's dealing with all that, we also see Angor struggling with his own stuff.
Hmm.
I mean, he's clearly out for revenge. But then there are these moments where he seems almost like protective of Angie, Declan's daughter.
Yeah. Like, remember when he stopped one of his guys from taking her away?
Right? What was that all about? Do you think he, like, sees his own daughter in Angie when he lost?
Maybe. It makes you question, like, how deep does his hate go? Is it all directed at Declan, or does it go for further?
Mm.
Or could it be, and this is where things get really interesting, maybe he's trying to keep her safe, prevent her from getting caught in the crossfire.
Wow. That's an interesting thought. Like, he knows what it's like to lose a child, and maybe he doesn't want Angie to suffer the same fate.
Right. And maybe that's why he's being so careful with her.
It definitely makes you think there might be more to Angor's plan than we realize. Maybe it's not just about revenge. Maybe he's trying to, I don't know, find some kind of redemption for himself, break free from all the violence.
It's possible. And that's what makes Angar such a complex character. He's not just a bad guy. He's someone who's been driven to the edge by grief and loss, but maybe, just maybe, he still has some good in him.
Yeah, like deep down, maybe he's not a monster.
Right. So we've got Declan trying to outsmart Mr. X and Miss Y while also worrying about his daughter. And then we've got Angar, who's becoming more and more of a mystery. And then bam! The screenplay hits us with the climax. It's like all the tension just explodes.
It's so well done. You can feel the buildup.
It is. How did you feel about the action scenes in this part?
Oh, they were intense.
Yeah.
The escape, the firefight, the hand-to-hand combat. It's like you're right there in the middle of it.
But even with all that action, the story never loses its heart.
Yeah, you're still totally invested in what happens to Declan and what Angor's really up to.
It's like you can almost hear the music swelling as Declan faces off against Mr. X and Miss Y. I was thinking the same thing. The writer really knows how to build those moments. Yeah, it's like you're right there with him, feeling the pressure, the desperation. He's got to disable that drone and save his daughter.
The stakes are so high. And then right in the middle of all the chaos, there's this incredibly powerful scene between Declan and Angar. It's when Declan finally learns that Angar knew all along about his role in that Kandahar bombing.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, this is it. This is where everything goes down.
I know. The tension in that scene, it's almost too much. You're waiting for this big showdown, this final fight.
Right. But then something completely different happens.
Something way more powerful. Something you don't expect at all.
It's what makes The Revenge so much more than your typical action movie. It's about forgiveness and redemption. Even after all the loss and all the pain, Angar choosing to seize Angie, to forgive Declan, it's huge.
It really makes you think about what it means to be human. Even after experiencing such a horrible tragedy, he's able to show compassion.
It makes you wonder, does real revenge even exist? Is it about getting even? Or could it be something totally different? Something that changes you for the better?
Like, maybe Angar achieved a different kind of revenge by choosing forgiveness. By letting Declan live with knowing what he did with that guilt, maybe that's a more powerful punishment than anything else.
Yeah, it's like they say, living well is the best revenge. And that's exactly what the screenplay shows us in the final act. We jump ahead to 2025, and Declan's an old man now, living a peaceful life with his daughter and granddaughter.
It's such a different world from the one he used to live in, all that turmoil and violence.
Right. But you can still see how much his past weighs on him,
Yeah, that scene with his granddaughter, Sarah Jr., really got to me. She wants to see his hand, and he, instinctively flexes his bicep.
It's like that muscle memory, that instinct to fight, it's still a part of him, even after all these years.
It's a powerful image. Even though he's found peace, those scars haven't completely faded.
Right, they're still there.
Oh.
And then we see him reading the Thirukkural, that ancient Indian text about virtue and compassion. He shares a part of it with Angie about how you should punish someone who harms you by doing good to them.
It's such a direct connection to Angar's forgiveness in the end.
Totally. Like Declan's still trying to make sense of it all, How could someone be so merciful after everything they went through?
It's like he's wrestling with the meaning of that sacrifice, trying to understand how to live up to it.
Exactly. By living a life guided by those same principles, compassion and forgiveness. And I think that's where the whole idea of redemption comes in.
Yeah, even after making terrible mistakes, even after hurting others, it's still possible to find a way to heal and grow.
It's a pretty powerful message. It reminds you that we can all change, that we're not defined by our past actions. And it's interesting how the screenplay connects that theme of redemption to both Declan and Angar.
Right. By forgiving Declan, Angar finally breaks free from that cycle of hatred and violence that was consuming him.
And his sacrifice,
Mm.
it's not just about saving Angie, it's about saving himself, too. He finds peace, and in doing so, he gives Declan a chance to find his own peace.
Wow, that's beautiful.
So, thinking back on this whole deep dive, I keep coming back to this question. Did the revenge actually succeed in exploring the idea of revenge?
Hmm.
Did it give us a new way of looking at it? Or did it just reinforce the old saying, revenge is a dish best served cold?
I think it did something much deeper than that. It went beyond that simple idea of an eye for an eye and showed us a more complex side of revenge.
Right. A side that includes things like forgiveness and redemption and breaking free from cycles of violence.
Exactly.
It's definitely a story that stays with you. It makes you think about your own values, your own capacity for forgiveness, and what choices you would make when faced with loss and pain like that. We'd love to hear your thoughts. What parts of this deep dive resonated with you? What questions did it bring up for you? Share your reflections and keep the conversation going.